I would spend more time understanding who my dream listener is, where they are hanging out online and in person, and then going there and just building a relationship with them. And that's something that I teach now to thousands of other podcasters because it works.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
And we're back with another episode of the podcast on podcasting. Today, I actually have someone on the show who has another podcast about growing your show. It's called Grow the Show. And his name is Kevin Chemidlin. How are you, Kevin?
Doing well. Excited to be here.
And you had your first podcast that launched in 2018. I think it was, May of 2018. And then October of 2020, you launched a new show. So some of what I want to ask you is, what you're doing differently with the other show, why you started another show, if you're hosting two at a time, or what you're doing, being able to have more than one. And then I'm really curious about something that I've seen that you did when you took a couple of weeks off for like the summer, I think, on Grow the Show. When you took a couple of weeks off, you republished a couple of other episodes. And I saw that on your other podcast about Philadelphia, you republished some episodes there too. So I really want to talk about best practices of republishing episodes and things like that. But first off, take me back to 2018. How long before this May podcast launched in 2018, how long had you been thinking about doing a podcast before that?
Yeah, so I vividly remember the moment I had the idea for the show, which was in December of 2017. I was on my way to work. At the time, I was a software developer at a big health insurance company. I was 4 years into my career in software and, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur and kind of always had side hustles, side projects. And at this moment, I was in between side hustles, right? Because I had kind of given up on one and didn't have one, and was listening to How I Built This with Guy Raz, very famous show that a lot of podcasters love. And they featured the story of Warby Parker, which is a glasses company that was actually built in Philly while the founders were in college at UPenn, at the University of Pennsylvania. And so just listen to this, really cinematic podcast episode telling this incredible success story of this company. And for me, it just lit me up inside that this company was built in Philadelphia. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to hear more Philadelphia stories like this in this way, right? As a podcast that's super well produced and, there's a lot of thought put in the story. And so I could tell you where I was on the steps in the subway station where I was like, holy crap, I think I could do this. And that was in December, but then the show didn't launch until May because I spent the rest of the year kind of methodically thinking, okay, how do you actually do this? How do you actually make a podcast? Who should I interview? I did practice interviews with some of my best friends, like really took my time with, building it up and learning how to do it, getting it going, and then launched it a couple months later in May of 2018. And that was very much the rest is history moment. 3 months later, I left the corporate gig, left software altogether to do podcasting full time. And that's what I've been doing since then.
Awesome. So the one that you started in May, you were able to quit your job just 3 months later, you said?
Yeah. So it was largely because, like I said, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur and kind of always had these side hustles going. So I very much planned to take the leap into entrepreneurship. And that was, another thing that I did in that time in between having the idea and actually launching the show. I kind of changed my behavior and started saving up even more, right? And spent a lot of my spare time working on developing the show. And, doing research on Philly and stuff like that, instead of like going out, I was 26 maybe at the time. And so I had a significant amount of savings built up just because I knew that I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so what happened was the first couple of weeks after the show launched, it got a lot of attention. As far as podcast launches go, it did really, really, really well. So I thought, okay, I figured it out. Here it is. Finally, something's working. I was made for this because really podcasting was the confluence of all of my skills, still is. So I was like, this is it. I finally found it. I'm going to take the leap, took the leap. And then there was no looking back, which is a good thing because what I learned just a couple of months after leaving the corporate gig was that I didn't actually know how to get more listeners and monetize. So the early attention that the show got was a lot from my social network. But what I didn't realize is that I didn't have the slightest clue how to get strangers to discover the show regularly and tune in and become fans. And I definitely didn't know how to make money from it. So while it was a big launch, it was this cool moment where I finally became an entrepreneur. The moment that you leave the job is not the end. It's actually the beginning. And it kicked off a long and painful journey to figure out how to actually, turn a podcast into a business that you can live off of. So anyway, that's kind of how that got going. So for about a year, I really struggled with it, but that's how I was able to take the leap so quickly, is that I had sort of prepared to.
Okay. A couple things on that. Just one of them was that you mentioned that in the beginning, your podcast got a lot of attention. What does that mean? Like, put that into numbers or metrics that we can kind of follow and understand what would happen if we were launching a podcast, what's good and what's bad.
Yeah. So on the very first day of the podcast, the show got 250 downloads, and there was no hype beforehand. There was no, hey, everyone, I'm launching the show next week. I mean, I did release a trailer a week before, so I forgot about that. But there wasn't, a lot of folks put together these really long and complicated launch plans for their podcasts. And I didn't do that, and the reason why that it did so well. So in the podcast world, the vast majority of podcasts that exist get fewer than 250 downloads, period, per episode. So the fact that this show, day one, with me having no built-in audience, no experience doing this, like literally nothing to say that it should do well on the first day, it did. And I didn't realize it at the time, but a lot of it has to do with how I announced it on the first day, which was essentially thinking, okay, who are the people who might like this show? Who are the people who want to hear the story of a successful Philadelphian? And specifically, who wants to hear this Philadelphian story? So episode 1 was a really well-known startup founder in Philadelphia. And so I said, okay, who wants to hear this guy, Rick's story in this manner? And so I went to a couple of online listservs that feature Philadelphia entrepreneurs and Philadelphia startups and spread the word there and said, hey, everyone, I'm launching this podcast today. And the first episode is with Rick Nucci. And Rick is a known and loved leader of that community. So immediately right then and there, we got 250 downloads on day one. And it really didn't, we got 250 fans on day one. That, the downloads didn't drop after that below 250. And so that was the immediate launch, and released an episode every single week after that for, 18 months. So the momentum built quickly. There was a lot of initial word of mouth with the show. And so that 250 then became 300, then 350, then 400, then 500. But then eventually my growth tapped out at about 800 once I ran into that threshold that I mentioned before, where it's like, okay, I've kind of tapped out my network, and I just didn't realize how good that strategy was on day one. So I didn't keep doing it. And that's where I got to the place where most podcasters are, where I was simply just spending tons of time making audiograms and social media content and posting it on social media and thinking and believing that that's what would drive listenership growth. And I sat on that for a long time. And of course, podcast numbers didn't go up at all. And then I was like, okay, what's wrong with this? I'm posting on social media all the time. And it would be a while until I learned that that's not actually how you grow a show. But anyway, that's kind of where I felt myself trapped in for a while.
So you mentioned about Listserve. What does that mean? What is a Listserve? What do you mean by that? And how does someone else use it?
Yeah, so it's basically just an email list, but instead of like a normal email list where Grow the Show has a 5,000 person email list where I can email 5,000 people, but the people on that list can't access each other, right? Well, a listserv is just like a Google group where you sign up to be on this email list, but anybody in the group can email the email list, right?
Oh,
so
okay.
So it's more of a forum type thing, but within email. And so, like I said, Google Groups is another. Listserv is basically just a brand that does those things. And so, this particular listserv is actually not a listserv. It's a Google group, and it's called Philly Startup Leaders. And it's run by a nonprofit organization in Philadelphia that provides resources to startups. And so I actually don't even know how many people are on the list, but there are just tons of entrepreneurs and people who work at startups and people who want to be entrepreneurs and people who are investors. Just basically picture the entire Philly startup community all just emailing each other all day on this list, starting threads and stuff like that. And so that's how that got started.
So you mentioned that was something that worked really well to grow the show and get it in front of people. but that you kind of stopped doing it, thinking that maybe email and audiograms and videograms and all those other social media promotion was the way to go. So you kind of stopped doing the one. If you had to do it all over again, like you went back to May of 2018 and you're launching that same show, just knowing what you know today, what would you have done differently for the first 3 months straight, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I would have probably put a little bit less energy into making the social media content. So like I spent a lot of time making audiograms. This was before there were all these tools and services online that'll make audiograms for you. In fact, like I opened up Final Cut Pro and learned how to use a video editor to make audiograms for the podcast. It was very labor intensive. They looked awesome and people were reaching out all the time saying, how did you make this? What tool did you use? I'm like, it doesn't exist. This is before all, like I said, there's Headliner, there's tons of them now, but this didn't exist back then. So I spent lots of time doing that, making the promo content. And if I were to do it all over again, I would spend less time making the promo content super fancy and just posting it on social media to the same 1,000 people that follow the account over and over and over. If your account isn't growing, then how is that going to find you new people, right? It's the same people that see it. And what I would instead do is do more of what I did on day one, which is think, okay, who are the people who want to hear this, who will truly get value from what it is I'm creating? And where are they currently already hanging out online and interacting with each other and getting similar content? And then I would go there and participate there. One of the things that I didn't mention is that because I was a wantrepreneur at the time, I had been participating in this listserv, in this group for years. Before the podcast, I had created a social media app that was geolocated digital piñatas, which I don't know how I didn't become the next Zuckerberg with that idea, but did that for 6 months and, did all kinds of conversing with folks on the list about iOS development and about all that. Before that, I was in a startup boot camp. And so, was connecting with people there. So when I posted on that listserv, I was already a known and valued member of the community. And so I wasn't just somebody who they had never heard before, just popping in and saying, hey, everyone, check out my podcast. It was, oh, shoot, Kevin launched a podcast. This is awesome, because they knew who I was and I had given value to the community before. So to answer your question, what I would do now is I would do for 3 months, yes, have some promo content on social media. Just make sure it's there and it's, in general valuable and looks pretty good, but I don't have to become the next Spielberg with it like I did. And I would constantly be thinking, where are these people currently gathering online? Where are these people already getting similar content online? And then I would go there and I would participate. I would not promote. I would not spam. That's what most podcasters do. And that's why it doesn't work. They join Facebook groups and it's just new episode available now. Check it out on all platforms. And nobody knows who you are. Nobody cares about your podcast, right? But instead, if you join the community and you actually participate and, give even just a little bit of value in some way, ideally in a way that relates to the show that you have, then people are going to see you as a human being and they're going to check out your show and they're going to actually listen when you later on say, hey, we were just talking about this topic. I really think you'd enjoy this episode of my show. And they're like, oh my God, you have a show? That's amazing. Let me totally check it out. That's what actually works. So long story short, I would spend more time understanding who my dream listener of Philly Who is, where they are hanging out online and in person, and then going there and just building a relationship with them. And that's something that I teach now to thousands of other podcasters because it works.
And I know that there's a lot of people who podcast or have had a podcast. Even sometimes it's just for a few weeks.
Yeah,
because they're always ahead of somebody. And constantly having friends and family say, you need to talk to Kevin, you need to talk to Adam, you need to talk to Sarah. She has a podcast. Maybe she can help you. And because of that constant amount of people that are coming, I just had somebody on the show and it's embarrassing not to be able to say his name just because it's just a temporary brain fog, but the podcast Answer Man was just on the show. And I guess he's helped several 1,000 people or whatever launch a podcast. And in that he started his second podcast because so many people were like, how do you do this? I started the podcast on podcasting as well. After having a different podcast and helping people launch. And I think that might be your route that you took as well. You start this first podcast what got you into starting another podcast and having grow the show?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It was a similar story. I did from the very beginning, like totally everyone who had the idea to have a show reached out. Oh, can we grab a coffee? Can we talk about it? So I did plenty of that for the course of a couple of years. But if you fast forward a little bit in Philly Who's journey, before I really figured out how to actually grow and monetize a show, I needed cash, right? Because I had left the job. And so I started outsourcing my own production to other companies, right? Other folks, other media companies. And then that quickly became a production shop. And we had a team of 4 folks here in Philly. We had an office, we had a studio space and everything. Our clients included Comcast, NBC, and Tom Brady's media company, and iHeartRadio. And so we had like 5 projects going on in addition to mine. And so this was late 2019. I found myself in a spot where, okay, Philly Who, I had figured out growth. I had figured out monetization. Now I was advising bigger media companies on how to make, grow, and monetize their shows. And that was cool and all. However, I didn't love it that much, doing all that contract work for bigger companies. I found that I was working harder, way longer, and making way less money than when I was doing software, even though the podcast was doing well. The other work, which was super cool, just wasn't paying well. And I don't know, I just wasn't having a good time with it. Well, enter 2020, enter COVID. And like many folks' lives, mine was turned on its head when that happened. And just in the course of a week, all of those production contracts went away. Because like, for example, the sports media company I was working with lost $1 billion when the March Madness tournament was canceled. So they said, okay, we have to cancel this podcast project. So I found myself in a position where I still had Philly Who, I still had my show. That show was still making money, still being released. And so, I could live off of that. I didn't need all those other media contracts, but those media contracts disappeared. And I found myself in a spot where I kind of went back a year and it was just me and Philly Who again. So I said, okay, I've got all this extra time, as many of us did in the first early weeks of quarantine. And I just said, okay, I want to do more in the podcast world. I've got all this time. I'm not going to just dump it all back into Philly Who. How can I continue to help other podcasters? So I said, okay, I'm just going to get in touch with as many podcasters as I could. So it was a little bit different than people coming to me and me wanting to create something, to help with that. It was more, I went to other podcasters, 30 of them over the course of May. In May 2020, I had 30-minute discussions with other podcasters, some of them independent, some of them people who work at some of the bigger broadcasting companies like that I, just in my network that I had accrued over the previous 2 years. And some people who work for startups, just tons of podcasters from across the gamut. And with each of them, I said, what do you need help with? And what are you trying to solve? Like, what are you not sure what to do? What problems do you have? And 30 for 30, 100% of them said, I got to know how to grow my audience. Nothing I'm doing is working. Nothing that's online is that people are telling me to do is working. And I'd love for this thing to actually pay for itself and make me some money. And so by the third one, I was like, okay, there's a need here that's not being solved that I know how to solve. And then by the 30th one, I was just like, okay, universe, like this is clearly something that's ready for me to help with. And I was like, wow, I, with Philly Who, had completely learned how to regularly and predictably grow an audience, a podcast audience, and how to monetize it through membership, through merchandise, live events, sponsorship, several others. And so I was like, I know how to do this and I can teach other people how to do it pretty easily. And so it was through that Grow the Show was born. And at first it was only in the form of the paid accelerator program. Didn't even think about the free Grow the Show podcast until later on in the fall, just because I really, really wanted I had never made a course before. I had never made a curriculum before. So I really wanted to focus on getting that right. So from June, got my first 3 clients of the accelerator program, spent June, July, August, and September just really, learning how to be a good coach and learning how to teach what I know how to do, because that's a different skill in itself. And then, by the time October rolled around, it was like, okay, the accelerator program is going great. We're getting more clients there. Now let's take all this information and let's put it into a free podcast so that we can serve as many podcasters that we can get to discover us, not just those who join, the accelerator program. And so that is the long roundabout way to say, similarly, yes, it was, podcasters need help. And that's how Grow the Show was born.
So the next question that I had, and thank you for going into that, I'm wondering about you republishing favorites.
Yeah.
I know you might do that now on the first podcast, still publishing episodes that might be repurposed. And I think I remember listening to your show a few weeks ago and there being an intro that said something like, hey, we are taking a couple of weeks off, and so right now we're publishing these other episodes that are our favorites in the past. So I'm curious, what is the strategy, how to do it, and if it works? Because I think a lot of us might want to take that easier route if we know that it works. But if we know that it doesn't work, perhaps we'll decide to try to go another way and make our jobs a little bit harder.
Yeah. So in the very, 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 very first episode of Grow the Show, I was fortunate enough to interview Eric Newsom, who wrote the book Make Noise, just an absolute fantastic book on creating and growing podcasts. Eric essentially created the podcasting division of NPR, 10, 15 years ago, created huge smash hit shows like TED Radio Hour and Invisibilia and several others. He's just a total podcasting godfather. He would eventually go on to Amazon after leaving NPR. Now he has his own production company. He's just an incredible person. He was the first guest of Grow the Show. And one of the things that he said was that while he was at NPR, he had commissioned their research division to do research on republishing episodes. Now, this was in the public radio world. But at that point, every single public radio show, which they were now turning into podcasts, they were making new episodes 52 weeks out of the year. And these are like really high production shows that have budgets in the hundreds of thousands, sometimes even the millions, teams of 30, 40, 50 people working on them. And Eric said, it basically had a theory, and it was proven correct by the NPR research division, that audiences will not get angry if you republish something. They're not just going to leave in droves and get all upset, which is what we podcasters and even they in public radio had in their heads, that people would be mad if there's reruns, right? When in fact, people, number one, don't get angry. They don't unsubscribe in droves. And number two, most people, like if you republish an episode today and you get 1,000 downloads on it, most of those people that downloaded that episode didn't hear it the first time it was published. We podcasters have in our head this idea of our listener that has heard every episode since day one, right? That's what we think of. People who just know everything. We're like, what's up, guys? Kevin's here. I know we talked about this in episode 7, 5 years ago, but we're back again. That's not how it actually works. And so we have to, as podcasters, address our audience, number one, always as if it's the first time they're hearing us, which for every single episode, if your show is growing, that is true. It's somebody's first episode. But in fact, most of your listeners have not heard all of your episodes. In fact, you would be surprised at how few episodes they've heard. So, and by the way, that is proven by data that I have from surveying the Philly Who audience. About a year, I think it was a year in, we did an audience survey and we asked, how many episodes of Philly Who have you heard? At the time we had released, I want to say 40, and the average was 6. And I was like, are you kidding me? I thought it was the same people every single week, but no, it's that your podcast audience is more transient than you know. So all of that together says, if you need to take time off, you should absolutely do that, because number one, it does give you an opportunity to republish your best episodes, right? The ones that really deserve to be put at the top of the feed, because odds are the people who hear it have never heard it before. And the people who have already heard it aren't going to get angry. And in fact, it's going to be good that they hear it again, right? If it's really that good. And the other side of that coin is, if you really need a break, you need to take it, because you might be sacrificing your show by not taking it. And we didn't plan on taking that break for Grow the Show this summer, totally candidly. Like, we were planning on just releasing bi-weekly throughout the entire year and never missing a beat. However, totally frankly, from a year of building out this coaching program, which now has over 100 clients, and building the show that has, it's just, I've done nothing but work on this for a year. And come June, I was just completely burned out, and I don't want to hear the word podcast, anymore. So I said to the team, I'm like, guys, I need a break. I am not effective right now as a CEO and as a student, as a teacher. Like, I just need some time. So we're going to make the call to flip the switch and do reruns for 2 months. And that was probably the best decision I've made all year, because now I'm just like, rip, roll, ready to go. And now we're going to be releasing episodes beginning today, actually. Grow the Show.
I heard your episode from today, and it literally said that. It said, we're back, we're back.
Yeah.
So,
and we're going to be weekly now, right? So the plan was to be bi-weekly. I had burned myself out. We said, okay. Now I felt the same fear that podcasters feel, where it's like, oh my gosh, you mean I'm not going to publish anything new for 2 months? Everyone's going to run away. Everyone's going to hate me, right? Like, people are not going to listen to the show anymore. Totally not the case. We picked the 3 most impactful episodes to grow the show, the ones that people have told me that they've listened to 6, 7, 8 times. The Eric Newsom episode is one of them. They said, I've listened to this 6 times. I've written down notes. Like, we said, okay, those are the most impactful and powerful ones. We're going to bump them to the top of the feed. And by the way, the show is still growing. So there are tons of people who have not scrolled all the way down to the bottom of the feed and listened to episode 1. So they're going to get value from that. And I'm just going to go sit on the beach for a week and not think about podcasts. And that's exactly what I did. And so instead of still being burnt out and still struggling to crank out an episode every 2 weeks, I'm now so refreshed and so excited to get back to it that we have made the moves to produce episodes every week. So by taking 2 months off, we're actually going to wind up putting out more content than if we didn't take the time off.
So what you're saying, Kevin, is that with your, little hiatus that you took, and you ended up publishing some of these really highly downloaded, highly valuable episodes, did you lose audience, keep audience, or grow the audience during those couple of months?
It grew. And what we have found is that we get several folks who join the accelerator program who, upon joining, immediately decide to put their show on to take a break because a lot of them, by the time they join, they're burnt out, right? Because they've been, just trying to figure this out all on their own. They're usually, 6 months, a year in, and they're just like, this isn't working anymore. They join the program, they get access to the course, the coaching, everything like that. And they're like, wow, we got a lot to do. We've got a lot to learn and implement. So we're actually going to stop publishing episodes for a while. This happens all the time from within the program. And every single one of them, 4 to 6 weeks in, will make a post and say, I can't believe our downloads are actually still increasing. We haven't released anything in weeks. And it's true, because what you don't do is you don't stop your audience growth activities, which don't have to be crazy. They don't have to be super intensive. Mine are 15 minutes a day. And you keep doing that while you're off, except for my week on the beach. I did, go on a phone fast for that week. But for the rest of the 2 months, we still did the normal audience growth activities. We just stopped the grueling process of creating really heavily produced, episodes with voiceovers and everything like that. So because of that, and because we kept the listener acquisition machine still rocking and rolling while we took a break, the audience grew. And we found that, most folks that we work with, and, you don't have to be in the program to get the same results. Most folks that we help see the same thing, where they start doing their daily growth activities and they find that their audience still grows even when they're not publishing. And then once they start publishing again, it really starts to take off.
With my first podcast, it was about real estate investing. And I ended up selling the show to somebody who became a co-host, and then I sold it to him. In this process, we were up to 500 or something like that episodes, maybe 550.
Wow.
And because there were so many, usually only like 300 show up on some platforms. So we had a couple of hundred that didn't show up anywhere. And I knew that if we republished those, then there would be another 100 or 200 that would now not be showing as well. So One thing that I did in order to sell this to him and have it the most amount of value is we pulled down like the first 300 episodes completely and switched out the intro and outro for like his stuff. But the important part is that we said that anytime you forget to publish an episode, we've got 300 episodes right here just waiting to go on the air. And so we had banked them for him, and he's used a lot of those. And the thing that you said, Kevin, is something that I was very worried about. It's difficult to come to terms with the fact that a lot of the people that listen have not listened to all 500. You just want them to listen to every single one. You want to expect that. But the cool thing is, with those, maybe we've published 200 since then, since I sold that to him, of these 300 episodes that we identified that we could bank. And not one time ever in the last almost 2 years since I sold it has anybody ever said, I'm complaining that you republished an episode.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's true. Right. And
that's like hundreds of episodes.
Hundreds. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, the more of a backlog, the more of a back catalog that you have, the more you gotta be doing this, right? Because if any, like I see it as, I'm actually cheating my newest audience value by not digging into the archives and bringing forward the best ones, like the highlights.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that you found the same thing. And same deal. Like, I have not once heard of anyone complaining about it, which is funny because it's like, why are we so afraid of this? Like, where does this fear come from? Nonetheless, it's there. And once you get past it, it's a pretty cool place to be.
So with your new podcast, Grow the Show, started October of 20, after having your program, I think in May of 20, you had enough clients and you said, we're going to give away some free content. First question, why does free content matter? Why did you decide that after selling content that you should give it away for free?
Because I love this question. I'm so happy you asked this question because I'm very, very passionate and I very much believe in the law of reciprocity. What I teach all of my clients who have information, portions of their business, and the way that we do things here at Grow the Show is information is available and free. I do not hold back a single bit of information behind the paywall of the program, right? Because by joining the program, you're not paying for the information, right? The information is free. We have available to us every single thing that's ever been known in human history for free in an instant, right? So it's not information that we're truly selling. What we are bringing you in the program is, number one, the packaging of that information in a really understandable, step-by-step, actionable way, which is different than a free podcast, right? It's coaching twice a week for 6 months. It's 12 episodes of editing done for you. It's access to community. It's so much more than the actual information, right? It's all built upon the information, but it is, it's much more than the information in the program that we're able to, provide in value. And so my recommendation to every business owner is to give away as much of your best information as you possibly can, right? Because that is the way that people understand that you're the real deal. And anytime, there's a lot of online coaches. Anybody can be an online coach. Anybody can call themselves an expert. And there's a lot of people out here selling $9.97 courses and coaching programs who really don't know what they're talking about. And so I recently had someone ask me, who is just kind of a friend, because I'm in this online coaching world now, who said, like, how the heck do you know when these online coaches are legit? And what I tell them is, check out their free content. If they do not have any free content out there, or if it's at least it's nothing new and you're not able to actually get value from it immediately, then don't buy their program, because what's behind the paywall is going to be the same thing. Nobody has life-changing information, where if you just pay $1,000, you'll get to it. That's not how it works, right? So if the information is truly life-changing, they're going to be, spreading the word on it. They're going to be getting it out there. And so that's what we do at Grow the Show. So part of it is that we absolutely want to serve those who the program isn't a good fit for. I mean, that's the majority of people. The program isn't for anybody, of course. And so we want to get as much of this information that actually works to them as possible. But also, there is literally no better way to prove that your program is valuable by just giving them a taste, right? You know what I mean? Like, here's the information. And so I'll put an episode out about targeted daily engagement, which is my framework that I created. And, ordinarily people would be like, you have to pay me to get access to my framework. I'm like, hey, here it is. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. You're going to see your podcast episodes increase in 1 week. Then let's talk. And a lot of people come back and join the program after that. A lot of them don't, but that's cool too, because they've grown their show, right? So that's my philosophy, is law of reciprocity. If you put things out there, if it's good, if it has quality, you're going to get more back from the world, the universe, God, whatever you believe in. And so that's how we do things at Grow the Show. Just don't hold anything back.
That's really good. And I hope a lot of people are taking that on. In all of my experience in business, the different businesses that I've done and seen other people that are in that or coaching programs, I definitely feel like the more you can give, the more you will get. The more that you push out there, the more time that you take in the education, in the free events, and the free podcasts, the more likely that more people will share your content. Like you said, Kevin, because of that, your show or your business will grow as a result. You mentioned something that I think many of us listening are wondering, or we heard you say it and we're like, what does that mean? Can he give us some tangibles on this? It was audience growing activities.
Yes.
It's activities that apparently grow your audience. You did this while you were republishing and repurposing some episodes. What are these 15 minutes a day audience growing activities that you're talking about?
Yeah. So the baseline is what I mentioned before, targeted daily engagement. And so this is the framework that I have developed and that we use here at Grow the Show to constantly be growing our audience. Now, this is what I recommend every single podcaster do from the moment you decide you're going to launch a podcast. You should be doing your 15 minutes of TDE all the way until you quit and even after. Now, TDE does have a threshold, right? So there will come a point where you'll also have to start doing other more scalable audience growth things, but it is the foundation and it is the baseline. And in short, what TDE is, in a theoretical sense, is basically every single day for 15 minutes, you are online interacting with your dream listeners, right? The people who you want to serve, and your dream collaborators, the people that you want to either be on your show or you want to have them write about your show or you want to be on their show, whatever it might be, right? You should be interacting with those folks every single day for 15 minutes on social media. Now, that takes a lot of different forms. And the prerequisite to that is that, number one, you have to be painfully specific with who those people are. The more vague you are with your podcast audience, the less likely TDE is going to work and the less likely you're going to get traction with it. Ideally, you want to find these people online, have interactions with them where you are not promoting your podcast. You're not spamming them with your link. You're not saying, check it out, please review. That's not what you're doing. You're just literally interacting, being social on social media. And, that's kind of basically it, the theoretical. And people are like, how on earth does that help you grow your podcast audience? It does in a number of ways. Number one, it helps you understand these people way more than you do now. So you're going to make a show that they're going to love even more than if you're not talking to these people. You're not actually interacting and seeing what their problems are, what their hopes are, what their dreams are, what they want to hear about. So number one, you're going to have a better relationship with them. Number two, you're actually going to have audience engagement. There are tons of podcasters who have great numbers, download numbers, but that's all they are. There was a point with Philly Who that I was getting 2,500 downloads per episode, and I had no connection to any of these people. I had no idea who they are. Right. I just would press publish. The numbers would go to 2,500 and I'd be like, great, I guess they liked it. And I had no ability to contact them or anything like that. So number one, you're going to understand them. Number two, you're going to have audience engagement. You're not going to have to worry about audience surveys because you're going to be constantly surveying them every day. And then number three, this is what's going to make people actually discover you and your show for the first time. So you as a podcaster have to go out into the social media world and do the work to find these people, interact with them, bring them into your sphere. And you can absolutely do it only spending 15 minutes a day. And we say that you must actually set a cap because social media is built for us to get addicted to it and built for us to scroll all day. So one of the prerequisites I say is we need to clean out your feed, right? So if you're on Instagram, we got to unfollow those people from high school that you didn't even talk to in high school, but you're still seeing pictures of their kids. We got to clean everything up and spend a really targeted 15 minutes interacting with those folks each and every day. And so if you want, I'm happy to go into the more specifics of the actual tactics, but that's kind of the thought behind it. And I'll wrap that up saying it's a habit that you develop and it breaks the habit of being on social media and only publishing and consuming and not actually engaging or interacting with people. So it breaks that habit. And through those 10 relationships that you build on social media every day, for 15 minutes, you're already spending hours. Just go to your screen time app on your phone to see how much time you're already spending on social media. So let's just take 15 minutes of that time, focus on going out, building a couple new relationships. And if you do that every single day, that compounds really quickly. You become a better creator. You understand your audience better because you're engaged with them. You're really in tune with what they want and what they're feeling. And these people actually know you as a human. So they would love to check out your podcast and they become raving fans. So that's the philosophy behind it. And so while we were taking a break, we were still doing TDE every single day, keeping in touch with podcasters, for Grow the Show, understanding like what are their pain points? What do they want? Like going into the groups and participating, stuff like that. So anyway,
What does TDE stand for then?
Yeah, targeted daily engagement.
Okay.
All three of those words are important. You can't skip any of those three.
I like it a lot. And two of the takeaways that I got there was you're connecting with two different types of people. It's your main avatar that you want as your listener and the types of people that you want to collaborate with as well. Yeah. And yeah. I like that because you can really step on the shoulders of giants, be part of, some of these other people that already have influence in a similar space. to be able to grow your message and get you in front of more people, but also you're connecting with those actual avatar. I like how you're talking about being painfully specific. And I was so we help podcasters as well. And I was on a call with somebody, and they are a coach themselves. They coach and mentor others in business. And one of the big exercises he always does is identifies that avatar. But we spent a lot of time with him yesterday and just kept asking him questions about the avatar. And at the end of the conversation, this already amazing person, he's like, Adam, I really want to thank you for spending the extra time helping me identify that avatar. And anytime that you're a podcaster, I'm a podcaster, Kevin's a podcaster, I love that. Be painfully specific about that avatar. Ask many, many questions. Who are they? Where do they hang out? What do they want? What are they afraid of? How many kids do they have? Do they ride the bus? Do they ride this? Where do they go for fun? What are they interested in? What are they searching? Where are they searching for it? So that was really, really helpful. And I quoted you saying, you got to be social on social media. I think that's totally important to actually use that medium the way that it was designed. I got some other notes. It helps you to understand your avatar better. It helps you get your audience engagement, which I think is the name of the game. Yep. And it helps you get discovered by more and more people. You mentioned connecting with 10 new people a day. Is that part of your framework? Is that part of what you're teaching your clients? Like, hey, you make sure it's 10 people, or where did that number come from?
Yeah. So this is actually the cool thing about my job, right? As a full-time podcaster and podcast coach, is that I get to spend all of my time coaching other podcasters and learning and adapting my teachings, right? And learning from teaching. And so what I have learned through over a year of the accelerator and over 100 clients is that when you break that down, I used to break it, only say 15 minutes per day of targeted daily engagement, right? That was it. Put in your 15 minutes. But what I found is that some people would sometimes log a really non-impactful 15 minutes and be more worried about hitting the time and more worried about engaging with people everywhere. So the 2 minutes on TikTok, 2 minutes on Instagram, 2 minutes on Twitter, we're like, no. That's not what we need to do. And what I found is that what I tell people to shoot for is 10 meaningful interactions a day. Right. So that doesn't always mean 10 new people a day, but what we look for is 10 meaningful interactions. And that's intentionally not quantitative. It's a qualitative thing to say a meaningful interaction. What does a meaningful interaction look like? It's being in a Facebook group and actually having a conversation with someone where you help them without asking them to check out your podcast or your blog or linking them to your website, right? That's a meaningful interaction. And they're like, wow, thank you for that. It's actually having a conversation with someone who is a dream guest of yours in their comments or in the DMs without pitching them to be on your podcast. This is what most people miss. They're like, oh my gosh, this is my chance. No, it's not. If you do it right, you'll have way more chances, right? So for me, a dream guest of Grow the Show would be Pat Flynn, right? Legendary podcaster, Smart Passive Income. And one of my favorite things is to interact with Pat online and not pitch him on my podcast and not be like, hey, Pat, when can you have me on the show? It's just having an actual interaction. And so Pat Flynn isn't listening to Grow the Show, but we have had several meaningful interactions on social media where I know that when the day comes that I do pitch him and his team to be on Grow the Show, he's going to recognize my name as someone that he's interacted with in a meaningful way on social media without me pitching him for his time, right? So it goes in both directions. And so that's what we shoot for. And what I found just, again, through coaching more than 100 people through this in a really high touch way, and then coaching thousands more for free in the free Grow the Show Facebook group, really aiming for that 10 meaningful interactions each day, a comment on a post, a DM, whatever it might be, but it's just truly adding value, law of reciprocity, giving without asking for anything in return. And then when the time does come for you to ask for something, for you to ask them to check out your podcast, for you to ask that dream guest to be on your show, for you to ask that journalist to do a story on your podcast, you'll have already banked so much social capital with them, and you'll be a person to them and not yet another person who is just asking, for free press or free publicity or for free attention. And so that's where the 10 meaningful interactions each day comes from.
Love it. Thank you. And I've got 3 more questions for you.
I can keep it brief.
I'm looking. Say that again.
I said I'll keep it brief. I tend to go. Into tangents.
Well, yeah, perfect. Well, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with these 3 last questions.
Cool.
Hey, my friend. As you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, GrowYourShow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now, you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show. All right. Before the break, I said that I had 3 more questions, and they're all important, and they can be short, but I'm hoping that we can pour a little bit more value into the listener who's already gotten a ton from you already, Kevin.
Yeah.
The first one is, does Clubhouse count as one of these social media platforms for the 15 minutes?
Absolutely, it does. If you're having meaningful interactions with people, it counts. And these social media platforms, I would argue that it is the quickest path to meaningful interactions with folks. So absolutely, it counts.
Awesome. The next one is, you mentioned earlier that you don't do 2 minutes on Twitter, 2 minutes on Instagram, 2 minutes on all of these different places. In short, what do you do instead? Instead of going 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, what's kind of a better strategy?
Pick one, get really good at it, knock it out of the park, ignore everything else, which is painful. Don't be everywhere. Ignore the you got to be everywhere. Get really good at one, be the go-to person there. And then once that's comfortable and you know how to do it and it's clockwork, then you can add another one thing at a time, instead of trying to learn a million things at once. And, they say the person who chases many hares catches none. So chase one, pick one platform, go all the way in and crush it.
Love that advice. Thank you. We should just stop because that was awesome. All right. The next one that I wanted to find out from you is about building an email list.
Yep.
What you do, how you do it. Somebody who's just starting to work with my team, we were just having a meeting today, and she said her email list is 148 people, which to some standards, that's way low, and to other standards, that's way high, right? But you mentioned that you have 5,000 people that want to know more about growing a podcast that you serve on your email list. And so if we take this woman and others like her that might have, less than 5,000 people on their list, to know the right ways to grow that, what does that person need to do and think of in order to get tons of people subscribing?
Yeah. So as short as I possibly can, if you want this answer to be short, because obviously this is a whole strategy in and of itself. But the way that I think about going deeper with an audience, right? Having them, deepening my relationship, and also having them going deeper in my funnel, right? As a business owner, is this tit for tat. I give you something, you give me something. I give you something, you give me something, right? The prospect, the listener, the audience member is never, ever, 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 ever going to give you anything, their attention, their contact information, anything, unless it's in return for something that's immediately valuable, right? Something that they will get value from immediately. So the way that, and you have to continuously be rewarding them for giving you their attention, their contact information, space in their mailbox, space in their ears, right? All those things, constantly rewarding 10 times what they're giving you. So for a lot of business owners, what their pitch to join the email list is something like, be in the know. Nobody wants to be in the know. Nobody wants to be in the know at all. Nobody cares about the know. Be the first to know. I want to be the last to know about something, right? So what you have to do is offer something that's truly, truly, truly super, super valuable. Ideally, right after you've already offered you've already given value, right? So I know we're totally pie in the sky and I'm trying to do this quickly, but give value. Okay, value has been delivered. I have this other piece of value ready for you in exchange for the next step of the funnel. So for example, for the Grow the Show podcast, at the end of every single podcast episode, what I don't say is check us out on social and rate and review. Or be sure to go to growtheshow.com for more. That's all vague. It's not clear how valuable it is. There's no time limit to it. So what I say is, hey, here's a summary of what you just learned in this episode. You just learned exactly how to grow your podcast audience for 15 minutes every single day, right? If you're going to need help with that, right? You're going to have questions. What platform should I be on? How do I spend that 15 minutes? How do I find those Dream 100? How do I do this? How do I do that? So if you'd like some direct help from me, come on into the free Grow the Show Facebook group and post a question, and I will personally answer and help you implement targeted daily engagement today, right? So I've said, okay, I've just given you value. In exchange for joining the free Facebook group, I'll give you even more value. I'll give you personal help, right? When they join the free Facebook group, I ask for email. Similarly, I have Facebook ads that go to a 1 hour long masterclass that lists out all of my frameworks. Again, all of my content. There is no, if you want step 5, you got to join my program. It's, hey, 60 minutes. Here you go. Go. Let me know how it goes. That's it. If you want to apply for the program, the button's there, but you don't need it, right? I ask for your email in order to do that. And then the kicker is, so that's how you get the email, is only by offering something immediately valuable right here and now. And then you keep their email address by adhering to a 10-to-1 ratio of that email list. You give value to them 10 times, then you can ask for something, apply for the program, buy my course, whatever it might be. And so that's how not only we build the email list by, again, tit for tat, value for value for value, in exchange for more attention, in exchange for contact information, but then we keep their attention, we keep their contact information by just completely overloading with as much value, more value than they could ever dream of. And that's easier said than done. But if you start to think about the tit for tat way like that, I only will ever take anything from you if I'm giving you massive value, then it's a lot easier to build out an email list. And hopefully that was quick enough.
That was fantastic. Kevin, thank you for jumping on the show, delving into all of this information that is so helpful to other podcasters in their journeys. A couple of my takeaways was that it's okay to republish and repurpose episodes, that you could use this company called Listserve and connect with people and already have emails of people that are subscribed, which is pretty cool. Additionally, thinking that the difference between what most people are doing with their podcasts on social media, which is to promote themselves, shameless self-promotion all day, every day, and it kind of works. It works a little. It also hurts some relationships, but you've found a way to do it a totally different direction. And you said to participate instead of to promote. And that is what's helping you, like with that one guy who you want on your show. You're just connecting with Pat Flynn. You're having a good relationship. You're giving value to people. And eventually you might say, oh, well, why don't you check out this episode of my podcast? But in a very non-pushy, non-salesy way, and just thinking about them. I think that's hard for some of us to do because, like you, for example, you quit your job a couple months after your first one, and you might not have yet had all the income coming in. You had some savings, but you may have thought, man, what do I do to just push this? And shameless self-promo would have been an easy thing. Like, I just got to get some more clients. But you found the way to play the long game. And I think that's going to help all of us. Thanks for going also into the audience growing activities, TDE, 15 minutes a day, and no more than that. So don't get burned out and don't get sucked into the algorithms. Engagement is the name of the game. And talking about how we grow that email list with immediately tangible, valuable information that they want right now. And I loved how you said you give it to them, or you offer it to them after you've already given them something. So they're like, this is already great. I would love to see the framework. This is already great. I would love to connect with him. All of that, just so valuable. I'm going to let you go. I want to thank you again for taking your time to add value to this audience and to me. Your website is already in the show notes. So if you're listening and you want his website, just scroll down. It's right there. Same with the link to his podcast. You can connect with him right away. All right. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Adam.
Bye for now. I really don't say this nearly enough. I don't mention this, and I feel horrible because it's a great resource for you to be able to take your podcast to the next level. And it's simply a free resource that I don't need your email or anything. It's just a podcasting course that I created that is ended up putting in the very first 6 episodes of this podcast. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely going to want to just check out those first 6 episodes, see how they can help you improve your podcast, get in front of more people, and have a better result where you're making more money through the podcast, etc. So much can happen after you listen through episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if you haven't done it, go do it now. And by the way, if you're subscribed, you'll keep hearing more great content. So to those of you who are, I'll see you on the next episode.